Hello, I'm Portia Young. Welcome to another edition of 1036 as we begin our 6th season here on Milwaukee PBS. So happy anniversary 1036 and to all who work on this program. And thanks to all of you for watching and supporting Milwaukee PBS. We begin with a story that shook Milwaukee to its core 30 years ago and how it's impacting many still today. Serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer committed the murder and dismemberment of 17 men and boys. Former Milwaukee Journal crime reporter Annie Schwartz was the first reporter on the dramatic scene at 25th and Kilbourne the night of July 22nd and early morning July 23rd, 1991. Dahmer was later killed in prison by inmate Christopher Scarver in 1994. She's written 2 books on the case, her latest coming out later this month. It's titled Monster, the True Story of the Jeffrey Dahmer Murders. Annie Schwartz talked with 1036 producer Marianne Lazarski about the case and why she's writing about it again 30 years later.
Could you just explain how you got this tip? You were the first reporter, right, to know about what was happening, how you got the tip, and once you got to 25th and Kilbourne, what did you see? What did you witness? What happened?
I was the part-time crime reporter at the Milwaukee Journal, which is the least enviable position in a newsroom probably. And what I was good at as a reporter, which I feel like is a lost art anymore, was making sources, was getting cops to trust you to tell you things. I never imagined that I would get a call from one of those sources on July 22nd, 1991, saying, Annie, you got to get over here. There's a guy that's been saving body parts in his apartment, and Rolf found a head in the refrigerator. So I'm taking this all in, and the source just said, you just better get here. So my first inclination was to think somebody's having some fun with me. It's one of the cops that I know that I work with who's just trying to have some fun with me, to tell me something that's not really true and get a rise out of me at, 11:30 at night. But something in his voice told me that I should get out there. So I went out to the scene by myself to 25th and Kilbourne, right in front of the Oxford Apartments. It was very early. There was, I think, only one detective squad there, if they were even there yet. But I walked up to the scene, I walked into the apartment building, and I walked up to the floor where Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment was, which was the 2nd floor. It was apartment number 213, and I stepped inside. I didn't take a tour, right? This was not, Parade of Homes. I walked in the door and I looked around because I was looking to see what was happening. What does this look like? I eventually went back outside because I knew that I was going to get in trouble for being there. And I had conversations with the neighbors, and it was obvious from the minute I got to the scene that this was a different crime scene. This was unlike any other crime scene I had covered. People were so quiet, and they were almost fearful. They were taken aback by what they were seeing and hearing. And the rumors were starting to get out about a head in the refrigerator, about body parts in the apartment, about the way the place smelled. There is a part of me that feels like that might have been the last genuine interviews that people gave about that case, because it became so huge that it wasn't just Annie Schwartz from the Milwaukee Journal. By the next day, it was Inside Edition, it was Oprah, it was Phil Donahue, it was pick a show. I mean, everyone was showing up and wanted to know about this story. And the stories became more and more embellished as time went on. But I was always very proud of the work that I and the rest of the reporting team did that very first night when we were trying to figure it all out. we could have gotten it very wrong because the details were so horrific.
When I was working at WISN, our overnight producer got on the air by 1 o'clock in the morning to report what was happening, and so we had a crew probably around 12:30. But again, it's one of those things like, what? What do you mean? A head in the free? You don't in Milwaukee? This is happening, right?
Nothing happens here. That was all of the. It's like, oh, this is a story that happens in California or Florida or somewhere else. It just wasn't something that happens here because this is the Midwest. And we have good German, Polish heritage, and and we are, we're church-going people, and all of those kinds of things that make the Midwest just kind of vanilla. And we really lost our innocence that year when more and more about that story came out.
No. People were it shook this city to its core. It really did. I mean, people after a while they didn't even want to hear about it anymore. I mean, it was so, details were sickening, the families were grieving. It was, and in newsrooms, certainly, we're trying to decide, what's the ethical thing to do? What's, how do we present this? What do we say? Even our graphics, what should it say?
What can we say?
Right. Tell us about this first book that you wrote on Jeffrey Dahmer, The Man Who Could Not Kill Enough.
I'd written 2 stories that first day. The first one was very much a kind of a here's what we know, very factual. But then I also wrote another story. And it started in a neighborhood inured to crime. This was something different. And I wrote a whole mood piece on what the crime scene felt like. Well, that ran in a national media outlet, and I was contacted by a publisher that asked if I wanted to write a book on the case. And you really don't say, well, this wasn't really what I dreamed of. I was kind of hoping for something else, something a little more palatable. But this was the story. 30 years later, I get a call from a publisher who said, what do you think? It's been 30 years. What do you think about going back? And that's what I did in the new book, in Monster. I went back and found all the principals from the case, those that are still alive, those that will still talk, and said, how did this case impact you 30 years later?
So how did it affect, let's say, a detective you might have talked to or a family member?
Yeah. So Mike Dubas was one of the detectives. He was the first detective on the scene. And I talked to him about it, and I'm always shocked when cops tell me that there is something that sticks with them, because I always think of them as such a hardy, sturdy bunch who, just are able to go to these horrible scenes that would, horrify most of us and do their job, do their work. So Mike Dubas said, you know what, Annie? He said, everything will be fine. And then I'll be walking past, like in a building, I'll be walking past where somebody's using like a cleaning fluid that reminds me of what I smelled in the apartment that night. And he said it really startles him, and it does give him pause. It gives him a minute.
That's one of the things that I marked in the book, that because as we were talking earlier about what you remember, or what kind of sparks that memory again. And when he talked about he's been around death a lot, but the smell wasn't death, it was that sweet chemical smell.
It was, and that's an important piece. That's a really important piece, because everyone was asking, from the cops who came to the building months before to the neighbors. They were like, didn't that smell like a dead body? Well, no, it didn't.
What about a family member? How do they even still want to talk about it?
No, that's the short answer. Families are not interested in continuing to talk about this. There is one woman whose brother was killed by Dahmer. And one of the things that Dahmer confessed to is that all of the victims were gay, and that he was able to seduce all of them to come back to his apartment with him. Now, not only do you find out, so he's not throwing a pillowcase over somebody's head and dragging them out of a bar. So not only are these families learning that their loved one was killed by a serial murderer in this most horrible way, but they also, some of these families, found out that their loved one had a private life, had a secret life.
What lessons did we learn or still need to learn?
Look how we've come full circle on this today. We're talking about issues of community trust. We're talking about how officers interact with the gay community. How do they interact with the Hmong community? How do they interact with the Black community? These are all, now we're having all these conversations. But when you look back at that time and you look at what we all had in front of us at the time, if you look what those officers had in front of them at the time, you really would have to say, no, they did not have a magic 8-ball. We wish they would have.
For more on the Dahmer case and to hear more of Schwartz's interview, go to MilwaukeePBS.org. The COVID pandemic continues to impact us, often in a negative way. But one local nonprofit listened to senior citizens during this pandemic and used their words to create art and build community. Milwaukee PBS videographers Erica Dreyfel and Jason Picars bring us the story.
My name is Rob Knapp. I am a musician and a producer here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
My name is Jackie Kostichka, and I'm a dance movement therapist and a performer in the city of Milwaukee.
My name is Michael Snowden. I'm a multimedia artist, and I've been working on this Beautiful Questions project with TimeSlips.
As a nonprofit, TimeSlips aims to bring meaning all the way to the end of life. And one of the ways we do that is by inviting people to answer beautiful questions. Beautiful questions are questions that invite a shared sense of discovery. They really tap into wonder. There's no right or wrong answer. Beautiful questions also really compel forward the process of improvisation that is really the root of what TimeSlips is all about.
The Beautiful Questions project is a project that between TimeSlips and some local artists where we got a chance to engage with isolated seniors through phone calls and through weekly workshops.
It was very interesting to communicate with them about the project and how the responses have been coming in and how we were able to come up with the idea of creating a video.
If you could look outside your window and see anything you wish, what would you want to see?
We created a legacy gift that we gifted to the elders and then to the community.
I would like to see a very large garden of roses.
We would ask them a beautiful question and really gets everybody to kind of lean into the creativity and imagination side of things.
Hello, my name is Phyllis. My name is Alice Cartwright.
Yes, my name is Deborah Crabb.
The Beautiful Questions project is with the Milwaukee County Department of Aging. We're also working with Goodwill, Meals on Wheels, and the United Community Center. We begin by training the organizations, the staff, so that they can layer in the beautiful questions into their well check calls. That's one way that we're able to get these questions to the elders. Another way is on the back of menus that are delivered with home-delivered meals through Meals on Wheels. We started the elder involvement by delivering with the meals an explanation of the program overview. So they had a sense of what was going on, what the artist's involvement was, what the questions would be for, and how they could participate.
Hey, Mr. Michael, good morning. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you, little person?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much.
Okay.
It started with a lot of the participants calling into our voicemail line and leaving answers to the questions that we had sent out. So those questions were things about the home, whether it be what area in your home is special to you. I started to think about a story that I could tell using all of these answers. And so I just started to piece together the questions and the answers into what seemed like was kind of a running story. And then from there, I underscored it with music.
What do you treasure in your home and why?
Mainly memories. Also, I do paintings, art paintings.
Well, I'm elderly, and all my life I was a choreographer and dancer. So everything that I treasure in my home has to do with sculpture pieces and paintings of dancers and dance notes and anything to do with the dance career.
I think it's very important to hear these elders' voices because lots of these elders are isolated and they don't get to share all of these beautiful answers to these beautiful questions.
What kind of animal would you like to be? And I said, an eagle. And they said, why? I said, because then I could fly.
Hearing these answers, you get to really feel that connection in the community, and you get to validate their value that they have in the community.
One of the questions was, what is your favorite place? Anyhow, I said,
The area that's special to me is my bed. What I like to do there is sleep, because sometimes I really have some fantastic dreams.
Beautiful questions was important to me because it gave me something every Wednesday to look forward to.
I would not want to live anywhere else.
On my porch or on the road, I'm feeling like I'm always home. I'm always home.
The entire piece was supposed to be about Milwaukee, and that's why we called it Always Home. Is about community and about connecting with people, even if you can't see them or even if you can't be around them. And obviously during the pandemic, we couldn't be around each other as much as we had been.
The pandemic really had a profound impact on everyone, but particularly older adults who were vulnerable and really needed to stay isolated. And that was what really compelled this project forward, was trying to figure out a way that we could engage older adults really meaningfully.
We chose to do this project because it was necessary. It was a moment in time where everybody was kind of in their silos, they're quarantined, there's really in a box. And this was an opportunity for not just the elders, but the artists. Like, I feel like I took a lot away from it too. Like, I got a chance to be creative in a new way and have conversations with people in ways that I never thought was possible.
As an artist, it just kind of made me realize how art can bring people from different communities together.
I would like to see small kids around here again.
I would like to see some birds.
I like to see the birds.
Oh, I really love birds outside the window.
This project strived to achieve creating a new model and just a way that we engage with our elders, and also inspiring other peoples to, like, hey, call an elder, check on them, make sure they're okay. Honestly, it made me rethink about like the older generation and how important their stories are and how important it is to reach out to them and to talk to them and to listen to them.
What will we give the next generation? What I would like to see is people have patience and thoughtfulness before acting.
One thing that I've learned through talking to some of these people is that they really just needed that sense of community, and they had stories that they wanted to tell, and they just needed somebody to listen, and that's really important and big.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Goodbye.
TimeSlips hopes to continue the Beautiful Questions project in the future. Pati Hinich is a chef and host of the award-winning Pati's Mexican Table, now in its 10th season on PBS. She's also airing a special on food along the U.S.-Mexico border. For our American Dreams initiative, Milwaukee PBS producer Mariano Avila sat down for a talk with Pati.
The idea of the border has profound meaning to me. That's Texas. That's Mexico. I was born and raised in Mexico, then moved to America, and I'm raising my family here. And I've spent my career traveling my homeland, sharing Mexican food and culture with the world. Are you with me? I want to tell you things. ¿Por qué querías abrir en Estados Unidos?
Porque siempre he buscado el sueño americano y que tuviera éxito en Estados Unidos. Abrimos el primero y fue un éxito tremendo desde el primer día.
I'm Pati Hinich. The American dream to me has become being able to stay rooted and connected to both genuinely without feeling like being more of one thing means you're less of another. After having my kids who are Mexican American and so proud of being both, and I've taught them that, at least I try to pass this along, that being a Mexican American living in America gives you double blessings because you have two cultures, you have two languages, you have two cuisines, you have two sets of values that you can draw from, but you have a double responsibility. You have to do right by Mexico and represent and stay connected and be proud and hold your head high and really try to enrich this country with what you've been inherited and given and contribute, while trying to do good by the home that you come from. And then you have to do right by America and show that, hey, it's worth it for you guys to have me here. I'm going to be a good citizen. I'm going to contribute. I'm going to represent well. So for me, the American dream has become that, being humble and grateful enough to know that we have these two fabulous worlds to draw from, but that we have that double responsibility that we have.
What are some of the misconceptions that you're having to negotiate between the two countries that you were not expecting?
You know, I've realized when I moved to the US and lived here for a few years, I was confronted with all these stereotypes of Mexicans and who we are, you know? They believe that to be Mexican, you have to look a certain way, act a certain way, eat a certain way. And as I started exploring more to share more, I realized that even to us Mexicans, but I realized how I was so wrong about the United States. I had all these ideas about what the US was. You know, I had, of course, the idea of, oh, the American dream and what does the US mean? But even when it comes down to food, I used to think, oh, Americans are going to be so fascinated when they realize that Mexican food has all these regional cuisines and all these ingredients. And, you know, they're going to make so much use of Mexican ingredients and food. And I used to think of American food as being very limited, because in Mexico, you think of American food as hamburgers, hot dogs, pizza. Little as I started traveling throughout the US to share my Mexico, I realized how little I knew about the US. You know, there's dozens of different kinds of barbecue and the Southern food and the richness and diversity that exists here. So I realized that, you know, the misconceptions and that the myths were the same on both sides, and that I had them myself for the US.
What's kind of been the trajectory that has gotten you to where you are now?
You know, born and raised in Mexico City, I trained as a political analyst. I wanted to work in themes that had to do with helping in any possible way my home country, you know, strengthening democratic institutions, civic culture. And then once I moved to the US, I married my husband, also Mexican, moved to the US. I really wanted to do something to help connect Mexicans to Mexico, which is what I thought was my dream, you know, to be an academic, to work in an office, to be writing research papers. And I'm, generally speaking, a very optimistic person. Like, I don't see a glass half full or half empty. I tend to see it overflowing. And I was just, Mariano, very unhappy, not satisfied, thinking that I wasn't connecting with people, and switched to cooking, you know, help Mexicans connect to our Mexican roots through food, and help explain who is Mexico to people through food, you know, who we are, what we look like. I got so many questions. I believe in the common good and being a humanist, but I believe in themes that I really care about. And so this explains how I started with Pati's Mexican Table. Here it is.
Wow, that's
beautiful. It is so pretty. It is so nice and thick. When I opened it, I was like, yay, this is like 4 years of work. It's 150 recipes. The book is called Treasures of the Mexican Table, Classic Recipes, Local Secrets, published now. I just went to Jalisco to film Pati's Mexican Table, the 10th season, and I found that not only were there the classics that I knew, but new classics. In this fall, I'm launching my first primetime special with PBS, which is called La Frontera. This project, I've come full circle to really go to the place where my two most beloved countries meet.
We all like to eat, right? As consumers, we often don't take the time to understand what impacts farmers impacts us. Next month on 1036, we will bring you a 1-hour documentary, America's Dairyland, at the Crossroads, produced in partnership with Milwaukee PBS and the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. Here's a preview.
Good morning from AM 1450 WDLB. We've got a nice sunny day shaping up here in central Wisconsin today with the bright blue sky out there today. Lots of bright sunshine. Grandpa used to say this is a haymaker, so get out there and make it count today.
It's really sad. A lot of dairy farmers in the area have exited. They've sold their cows and quit.
Don't run and go there. Talk about a fine cow sold.
How did you make the decision to say, I'm done? That was Dad's decision, and I was upset. Matter of fact, I probably said a few choice words.
I don't think anyone in Washington even knows those type of farms even exist. They like to use a picture of the little red barn on their news or advertising, but you know, I don't think they even know, or sometimes I don't even know if they care if we exist, you know.
I hear his frustration, and they are the most hardworking people I know, and we have to have their backs. We have to work as hard as we can. The clock is ticking.
The farm is going to continue to exist. There are going to be robots, manless tractors, satellites looking down on your individual farm fields. Farmers are going to take their game to another level.
That'll do it for this edition of 1036, but before we go, we want to wish our director in the control room a happy retirement. Raul Galvan has been with Milwaukee PBS for 29 years and directed this show from the very start. Muchas gracias, Raul, and much love from all of us here at 1036. We'll leave you now with a view from above Creekside Valley Farm in Mequon.
Nice. Nice, nice.